I heard this woman screaming, "She's dead."
A brutal killing.
This woman was controlled. She was bound, tied up for a reason.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
He's one of these guys that thinks he's smarter than everybody else.
And he said, "You tell anybody, I'll kill you."
The truth will be revealed.
He thought that he could get away with this.
This poor woman probably begged for her life. It just sends chills all over me.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Nestled between the Indian River and the Atlantic Ocean lies the peninsula of Merritt Island, Florida.
We do have a lot of tourists that come through. It's known for water sports. The whole county is pretty much surrounded by water. A lot of boats, fishing.
But this is a very laid-back county. We're tucked away over here on the coast, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place to live.
But one hot July afternoon, the waterways reveal a grim secret.
The judge that lived on this piece of property, and he was doing yard work. He saw what he thought was a manatee. So he walked to the shoreline. And that's when he saw that it was a woman. He called the sheriff's office, and then I got the phone call.
Brevard County Sheriff's agents Jerry Harrell and Allie Roberts arrive at the scene.
We see a nude body of a female. As a homicide agent, that's not a good day.
The body's in a moderate stage of decomposition, the bloating. It hadn't purged yet, so it was probably twice the size it would normally be. She was tied with rope and some type of duct tape, and it had plastic bags tied to the body.
To catch the killer, investigators will need to unravel the last 24 hours of the victim's life.
The significance of those last movements of your victim are often critical to what happened.
Their first challenge is the woman's identity.
We knew that we had a nude white female, don't know who it is. When you have a name, at least you can do some victimology. You need to start looking at that person. What can you find out about that person? What does that person do for a living? What people are surrounded by that person? We have a fingerprint expert, one of our crime scene techs, and she fingerprints the body.
She is identified as 22-year-old Misty Morse of Indian Harbor Beach.
We find out that she lives a short distance away from there. She lives with her mother. And she grew up here. She's a local girl. Encouraging to me because usually the killer is someone that you know. That gives me a way to go, rather than being an out-of-stater or out-of-towner who was just driven here.
They look to determine how long Misty's body had been in the water.
It can make it more difficult to determine time of death. You have to take into consideration the temperature of the water and control for that. The water may accelerate the internal changes in the body and cause more decomposition at an advanced rate than it would outside the water in cooler conditions.
This is July in Florida. It's hot, the water's warm.
The heat, the insects, the animals, sometimes it's kind of hard to gauge exactly how long a person's been deceased when they're exposed to the different elements.
I'm thinking this body had been in there for several days.
As they start to develop Misty's timeline, a theory forms.
I'm thinking at that point, someone either drove in the dark of night and threw her out of a car, into the river, or she was dumped off of a boat. I'm looking at the body. It has some bags, like grocery store bags, tied to it. So whoever put her there weighted her down, and she was probably on the bottom for a period of time until those rocks or weights that were used busted through the bags, and then she popped up.
The physical evidence presents disturbing insight into their victims' last moments.
There was also a black rubber cord of binding. It was window spline. It's tied around her. She was bound with a piece of nylon rope. It was red and white in color.
There's tape wrapped around the head. She was controlled, she was bound, tied up for a reason. This poor woman probably begged for her life.
They must now decide how much of this harrowing detail to impart to her next of kin.
There's no way of telling somebody in a good way that their loved one is deceased, have been murdered. So the best way to do it I've found over the years is to come out and tell them.
Her mother opened the door and looked at us, and it was obvious that we were detectives. And her mother said, "It's her, isn't it?" And I said, "Yeah, it's her." Her mother had seen the news coverage and told me that, Misty didn't come home, and she just feared that it was Misty. She had been expecting us. She didn't know what to do. It just sends chills all over me. Being a parent and having children Misty's age at that time, you think of your children as children. I felt so bad for her.
Misty's mother contacts her ex-husband, Bob Morse, now living on the west coast of Florida.
I answered the phone, and then I heard her screaming, "She's dead. She's been murdered." And I said, "What? Who is this? What are you talking about?" She said, "Misty, she's dead." I almost fell down. I mean, literally, I almost fell down. I said, "What happened?" She goes, "Somebody killed her. They found her in the water." I said, "Oh." There wasn't anything I could do. It just made no sense at all. The big question is why? What would drive someone to do something like that?
Misty's family provide investigators the details of her life.
Misty's mom started describing Misty, how she was named as a baby, Misty April Morse. She was born on a misty morning.
Misty was very much of a free spirit. She definitely marched to her own tune. At 22, you know, she was just at the stage where she could, you know, get out, go do whatever she wanted to do. I think that at that time, Misty was looking to discover herself and figure out who she was, what she wanted to do, where she wanted to be.
The focus shifts to the last time Misty was seen alive.
Misty's living in a little apartment with her mom. Her mother said that the Wednesday night before, Misty had come home from work around midnight. She said she could hear Misty on the phone talking to someone.
She talked for a few minutes, then a little bit later she received another telephone call.
Misty's mother says the first call came in at 2 a.m. and the second 20 minutes later.
She said Misty opened her door, popped in her room, spun around, asked her, "How do I look?" And Misty was very happy. Misty she said, was going out with someone that she was excited about, someone that she knew. Her mother did not know who that person was. After Misty left, she went back to sleep, got up, and went to work as usual.
Her mom tried to call her a couple times, see what was going on, when she was coming home, all that, and never got a hold of her. I had called her, but not getting a hold of her didn't surprise me. It was not unusual for Misty to take off with friends and go do whatever.
But when she didn't come home the next day, that's when she started worrying.
The details provided by the family, together with the condition of her body, help police determine a likely time of death and a lead on who was responsible.
My opinion, she was last seen early morning hours, Wednesday night going into Thursday morning. She's found on Sunday afternoon. I thought that she had been in the water soon after her mother last saw her.
In the manner in which she left the house, it's pretty obvious that she was leaving with somebody she knew. The person she left with, we were pretty confident it's the person that killed her.
Detectives believe Misty's unidentified caller may be responsible for her murder. They ask her mother for help in identifying who it could have been.
I assured her that we would be there for her and that I would follow this case through. She told me about everybody that she knew in Misty's life.
From the list she provides, one name stands out to her.
Teddy Underwood was I don't know if you'd call him a boyfriend. She met Teddy through a girlfriend of hers. Teddy's a good-looking guy.
Mr. Underwood had dated Misty for a short period of time prior to her death.
Detectives check his background and make an important discovery.
Teddy had other arrests and burglary and some type of sexual assault or battery charge.
When police find a suspect who has some sort of record for sexual assault, it definitely puts a huge flag on that person. They would determine if that person would be a likely suspect to commit murder.
That shot him right to the top of the list.
They use his criminal record to help track him down.
Teddy was a fast talker. He was the guy I had to give a lot of attention to. You're interviewing them, you want to tie them down to a story. Okay, it's not interrogation, it's a fact-finding mission. Just to get a timeline going. And that's very important. We put him on the hot seat. But Teddy responded, you know, he was as cool as a cucumber. And he told me, I said, hey, man, I want to help you. But I know you're thinking it's probably me. He says, I understand that. I says, but it's not me. Teddy described it as a short affair. I mean, they may have hooked up a time or two. He moved on, she moved on. It was just one of those things that was short and sweet.
You're judging what they're telling you. Is it making sense? How are they acting? What's their demeanor? Are they trying to be evasive? Are they forthcoming?
Teddy says he had not seen Misty in over a week, and that he was with his friends in the early hours of Thursday morning.
Teddy had an alibi and no interest in the river or being on boats or anything like that. He was so honest and truthful. He had nothing to hide. I go by that gut feeling, and I just did not have it with Teddy.
As Teddy is cleared, they turn to Misty's autopsy for clues that may help to ID the killer.
There was no obvious bullet holes, no obvious stab wounds, but the body itself can give you clues. As an investigator, when you look at a body that's thrown in the water, that's been blindfolded and gagged, I think it's safe to assume that that person was probably alive when they went in the water. Why else would they be blindfolded and gagged? So if that's the case, drowning is a very high possibility.
There is this misperception in general that if water is found in the airway, in the lungs, and in the stomach, that means that an individual drowned. But in actuality, water can enter the body in those places passively after death. So it doesn't mean definitively that an individual died from drowning just because they have water in their lungs, they have water in their stomach.
The medical examiner just would not give us a cause of death. Now, the manner was clear. Homicide.
The examiner probes further, looking for details hidden from the naked eye.
When you're doing the autopsy, not only are you looking at the body itself, but you're looking at everything attached to the body.
There are things that may show up in microscopic examinations, and you don't know what it means until the investigation is advanced and you have more information.
When you're removing the tape from her head, there's a hair present.
It's a clue, but more work needs to be done for it to pay off.
DNA is a very helpful tool in investigating a death, but it's only helpful if you have something to compare it to.
The pathology work is now complete. Misty's father arrives and immediately provides police with a new name.
Misty was telling me about this new guy that she'd met. He was good looking and he had money and he was an ex-Navy SEAL.
She had a semi-long-term relationship with a guy by the name of Brent Huck. And he talked about how he didn't like Brent. Brent was a guy that bragged a lot, had money, and made everybody know it.
Brent Huck has this persona of being like a bad boy. And I think a lot of the girls and a lot of his friends are attracted to that type of personality.
I know that Misty liked to take chances, like most 22-year-olds. I did when I was 22. I think most of us do. We all think that we're 10 feet tall and bulletproof and gonna live forever. I remember thinking that when she was younger, we wondered if she was gonna make it past 18 because she had seemed to have a real bent for getting into trouble, associating with not good people. But we felt like, she was over that. She had been seeing Brent off and on. I said, look, you can do better than this. You don't need this guy. Get away from him. Just stay away. He's bad news. Of course, as you know, every parent on the planet knows, the fastest way to get your kid to do something is tell them not to do it.
He says, you really need to talk to Brent Huck.
Detectives track him down at his parents' house, an upscale home on Merritt Island.
Brent didn't know we're coming. You know, we're hoping that, hey, this is going to take us somewhere. Knocked on the door, we waited, hear a dog barking. Brent finally comes to the door.
We started talking to him about, you know, his relationship with Misty and you know, how it's been going. He tells us that he's known Misty for like 1.5 to 2 years, somewhere in that neighborhood. They've dated for a while. He said that she even moved in with him for a couple months.
As they talk, Agent Harrell spots something suspicious.
I noticed he had abrasions on his knuckles and hands, and I asked him, how'd that happen? And he says, my dog was pulling me with a leash, and I was on my skateboard, and the leash burned my hands. It's not a burn, it's an abrasion. That's a crazy story.
Detectives bring him down to the station for more questioning.
If you didn't have anything to do with this, this will prove to you that you didn't. He had no problem interviewing with us.
Brent reveals to police his relationship with Misty wasn't really over.
It wasn't really a friend, it was more of a benefit, not really a friendship. It was a, I could go over there, I knew if I talked to her enough, I could still go over there and have sex whenever I wanted to.
He kept her on the string, so to speak.
When was the last time you slept with her? I'd say the 11th. The 11th? Yeah.
July?
Yes.
Was that at her house or your house?
Her house.
This was 9 days before Misty disappeared. Brent then admits things had recently become more complicated.
He sent some friends of his, called him, he says, hey, we saw Misty and Misty's pregnant?
Brent called to confront her the same night she disappeared.
I asked her, I was like, look, you know, what the hell is going on? When I saw her on the 11th, I was like, you're not pregnant. You know, why do I keep hearing this? You really ruined my life.
Brent Huck's admission to phoning Misty the night she died has made him the latest suspect in her murder.
He told us, you know, that he called her and bitched her out and told her to stop saying those things because he had a girlfriend.
I bitched at her, and then we settled it out. I remember calling her back 5 minutes after I talked to her and just saying, you know, real quick, saying thanks and hanging up.
So you bitched about the pregnancy?
And you're looking at what this person is telling you. How does that fit into what you know already?
For detectives, the timing of those calls now becomes critical.
When was the last time you actually talked to her?
I want to say right around 3 a.m., 3 or 4.
This is over an hour after the calls that prompted Misty to leave home.
If he puts his time frame in at 3:30 to 4 o'clock, that would have taken him out of that range.
Brent also claims he was nowhere near her house that night.
When you say you went home, you went...
Yeah, just parents' house? Oh, yeah, parents' house. At that point, I was fairly intoxicated as well. It was a rough night. That's how I described it.
He had been partying pretty hard that night by the time he talked to her on the phone. It's a whole group of people. They're drinking at a couple different bars. He goes to someone's house, they're still partying.
He called another young lady to give him a ride home.
Brent says that by 4 a.m., he was in bed asleep.
And we spoke to his friends who corroborated that.
He had been dropped off by the young girl. He was at his parents' house for the rest of the night.
Despite the potential motive, his alibi seems solid.
Homicide is a 24/7 job. It's very taxing. Because when you go home, you don't take the gun belt off and throw it down and forget. The cases you're working are forever in your mind. You wake up in the middle of the night thinking about something that you need to do or should have done or should have said or should have asked.
Believing the key still lies in identifying Misty's late-night caller, they continue to probe friends and family about her relationships. This brings them to a new name, Bobby Cooper.
I guess Bobby was expecting the law to show up, and we did. We interviewed him, and the guy was all crying. I mean, the guy was upset.
You can learn a lot based on their reactions. It's not necessarily just the words. It could be they start to cry. It could be they overdo the crying. You've conducted so many interviews at this stage that you're relying on your experience to tell you whether that's a real reaction to this scenario or not.
And he told me, he says, hey, I really love this girl. We had just met, and it was a whirlwind, a few days. He's very talkative, and he's answering my questions. He explained when he last saw Misty, they went to a movie, and he'd been calling her and calling her, and he says she didn't answer the phone. I thought maybe that was the end. Maybe that's just her way of ending the relationship. She just won't answer.
Bobby tells police he did finally get through, saying he spoke to Misty the night she disappeared.
I talked to her Tuesday night, and then I talked to her again on Wednesday.
You call her cell phone or what?
Yes. Yeah.
How many times Wednesday did you talk to her?
I talked to her once on Wednesday.
And that was?
7:30, between 7 and 7:30.
He told us he talked to her on the phone, and that's very important.
Bobby explains he tried her again on Thursday afternoon. When he got no response, he left several messages.
One of the things killers will do sometimes is leave messages on a victim's phone to create alibis for the murder.
We see this as an attempt by the killer to throw the police off the scent, or to throw the family off the scent of the trail, and throw the investigation in another direction.
At that moment, Bobby stuns Agent Harrell with an unsolicited admission.
Bobby said I had her driver license. That's one of the things we were looking for, we couldn't account for.
If you have the property of a dead person on you, you better have a good explanation for how you got it. Because if you don't, you're going down for that murder.
The possession of Misty Morse's driver's license puts Bobby Cooper in the spotlight for her murder.
I asked Bobby, how'd you get her license? And he says, I've had it since we went to the movie. She was wearing pants that didn't have pockets, and she just wanted me to hold on to it. He says something to the effect, well, that's one way we're guaranteed to see each other again.
I think in his mind, if he doesn't cooperate, or he gives a hint that he's not cooperating, that we're going to look at him, as a suspect.
Bobby claims he was at home with his family during the time Misty was killed.
He accounted for his time, and his dad verified that. Bobby was not our guy. Time to move on.
As a homicide agent, you have to be very patient in what you're doing. We have multiple agents interview different people, and at the end of the day, we sit down, okay, what did your guys say? What did your person say? We just review all those and try to put the pieces together as they fall.
Everybody we had interviewed, they can explain where they were or explain their relationship. We just kept moving forward.
Then, police receive a key piece of evidence they've been badly waiting for.
Misty's phone records, when we got them, told us exactly how many seconds, minutes she spoke to certain phone numbers who had been trying to call her. The phone records is a line-by-line item. It told the story. You can see Bobby Cooper trying to call her over and over again, which corroborated what he said. And what was really important on her phone record is incoming call from Brent Huck's number, twice, just like what he said.
Brent first told detectives the calls were around 4 a.m.
But it was more like 2 o'clock, 2:20 a.m.
It was Brent Huck right back in the time frame of when the mother side of Misty that received these phone calls.
It's easy to lie using the right information, but just maybe changing the time up.
When someone's caught in a lie by police, it definitely sets them up as being a potential suspect, because police will start questioning as to why they did this, why didn't they tell the truth in the first place, and what were the reasons behind them lying, period.
Brent had a rocky relationship with Misty. He's creating these lies, he's living a lie.
Digging into Huck's personal life, investigators discover what may be an even greater motive.
He's got this girl on Palm Beach County, his new girlfriend, who's supposedly well-connected and maybe wealthy or connected to a wealthy family.
Brent and his girlfriend were in the process of buying a house in South Florida, wedding plans. I mean, they were moving forward with their relationship. But Brent had that problem, and that was Misty back here, that he just wouldn't let go. Looking back, you're wondering if that was the catalyst for Misty saying she was pregnant to everybody, knowing that that's going to get back, hopefully, to the girlfriend.
Police decide to pay the woman a visit.
My understanding was she had no knowledge that Brent Huck was having any type of relationship with Misty. As far as she knew, she was the only female in his life at that point.
Concerned her boyfriend is involved in a homicide investigation, she agrees to cooperate.
One of the investigative techniques would be to flush someone out. To have someone call your suspect, who the suspect might be comfortable to speak to. It's just another form of getting them to speak, getting them to come out of the closet to say something.
She tells Brent that the police want to speak with her about Misty's murder.
Yeah, they're really serious about you.
I know.
Is there anything you want to tell me now before it comes out later?
There's no way about it. I'm not talking on my phone. Period.
Are you getting mad at me now?
I'm not gonna talk on the phone. If you want to get down to the bottom of this, come talk to me. God!
It's not serious.
Goodbye.
It's pretty obvious from the phone call, he's got some anger issues.
And I think he's being found out, you know, that he has this other thing on the side and all that. And of course, she wanted to know, and she wasn't happy about it. And that, I think, was a big part of understanding Brent Huck. That was my first I got you moment. I'm thinking, here we go, this is the guy.
With Brent Huck back in the spotlight, investigators revisit his main claim of innocence, his alibi.
He had told us before he got home around 3:30 or so in the morning.
They track down Lauren, the young woman who took him home from the night's partying.
She just drove him home. She was going that way. It was no big deal.
But Lauren says she picked Huck up at 2 a.m., 2 hours earlier than the time he first claimed he was home asleep. Which means he could have driven to Misty's house soon after.
We actually asked Lauren, being the last person we know that had contact with him, did he have any injuries on his hands? No, no injuries. So it had to happen that night.
Based on this new information, investigators decide to pay Huck another visit.
Brent talked to a lawyer or two. Of course, they told him not to have any more contact. But we wrote a warrant to go back to the house to do more searching. They find the window spline in the garage. They find cell rope. They find under the sink these Publix bags.
A lot of people have spline in their house. A lot of people may have white tape at their house. A lot of people may have plastic bags at their house. What's the chances of having all three? They were able to determine that that spline came from the exact same machine as the bindings on her body, from the same factory, the same company. Same with the tape. They were able to identify the tape as the exact same tape that was found on her body, exact same company, same make, same physical characteristics, same coloring. A match. And being the last person who talked to her on the phone. So all these things are adding up. It's a lot of circumstantial, but it's all, you know, compounding against him.
But the most compelling evidence proves to be the hair found on Misty's body.
It's an animal hair. It found out to be dog hair. And Brent Huck had a dog.
The DNA really locked it in. This is the dog. It's not just the breed of dog. This is the dog.
In October 2002, Brent Huck is indicted on kidnapping and first-degree murder charges. Key to proving his guilt is the reconstructed timeline.
I think Misty got home from work. Brent was out partying. He hears the rumor that she's telling people that she's pregnant with his baby. So Mr. Huck has got to do something about this. He has Misty claiming that she's the mother of his baby, and he cannot afford to let his new girlfriend hear about this. He's got to shut her up somehow.
He ends up home probably around 2 o'clock. He's mad. He's a hothead. He's arrogant. He's spoiled.
He called her, probably under the pretense to come over and have a sexual relation that they normally have.
He drove there. He called a quick, "I'm downstairs." That explains for the very, very short call that lasted like 10 seconds. She goes downstairs, gets in the car, off they go to his house.
The whole time I think he had it in his mind to go ahead and kill her.
He was able to incapacitate her. He got her tied up, her hands, her feet. Weighed her down with these bags filled with rocks. And took a roll of duct tape and wrapped her head. He puts her in a boat.
At this point, Misty is still alive.
I think that she struggled to get loose. She moved her head around, got the duct tape off of her mouth, begging for her life. He rolls her off the boat in the deepest part of the river. And she sinks.
I think he dumped her in the river while she was alive, knowing that she was going to die.
Despite the strong physical and circumstantial case against him, Huck pleads not guilty.
I don't want to say it's an airtight case, but we're very confident in our case. How do you explain all this? You can't. I think he thought that he could get away with this, maybe a plan in his mind how he was going to do this and how it was going to pan out, but things weren't going his way.
I remember, I think I was holding my breath, and all my muscles were clenched up. And as soon as they said guilty on both counts, I remember, thank goodness.
28-year-old Brent Huck is sentenced to life in prison.
Is it justice? I think justice would be let her daddy spend an hour with him. That would be justice.
I don't want him dead. I want him to spend the next 500 years in jail. And I want him to remember every day of his life what he did. So whatever anyone calls justice, I don't feel it. I'm just glad that he can't do it to anyone else.
The sheer brutality and sadistic nature of what went on that morning in that house. It's something that sticks with you for the rest of your life.
A brutal killing.
She had 80-something stab wounds on her. That amount of rage is usually going to be somebody very close to the victim.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
They're telling me about how their mother has 2 boyfriends.
It's kind of a sugar daddy relationship.
She kept yelling, "No, don't come to my house."
The truth will be revealed.
Everything told me that something wasn't right here and that it wasn't over.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. "20 miles east of Atlanta lies the sleepy town of Conyers, Georgia.
It's just a short distance from the heart of the city, basically. but it still, in a lot of aspects, still has kind of a small town community feel.
We're a very safe community, very little violence. We probably have maybe 1 or 2 homicides a year. It wouldn't be unusual to go a year without a homicide.
But on a calm January afternoon, a piercing noise cuts through the neighborhood.
I got a phone call to report to the chief's office. It was around 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Chief let me know that there had been a homicide and that currently the Rockdale County Sheriff's Department was on scene.
Twins, Jasmia and Tasmia Whitehead, have made a horrific discovery.
There happened to be a deputy just driving by who they flagged down.
The twins ran up to the side of the car and literally beat on the side of the car, screaming that they had found their mother dead.
For Commanding Officer Jackie Dunn and Lead Detective Ken Swift, it's their first murder of the year.
When we first arrived, there was already a number of officers cordoning off the scene, and there were 2 young girls in the back of the van crying hysterically.
But you have these 2 very sweet-looking little girls traumatized.
One of the twins was biting the inside of her forearm. She said, "It's just a nervous habit. I do it when I'm nervous." It was heartbreaking to watch. You want to be sensitive to their emotional state. And so you treat them with kid gloves. You're very delicate in the way that you approach things.
The twins direct police to the location of their mother's body. 34-year-old Nikki Whitehead.
When you walked up to Nikki's home, you see chaos. Stuff had all been thrown about. You see overturned chairs, broken vases on the floor, and you see and smell lots of blood.
You could smell it like, you know, the rust off of a penny. It was really, really strong. Nikki was where the daughters said they discovered her, just off the master bedroom, in a jacuzzi-like garden tub with water in it.
And she's laying partially submerged with her head out of the water.
Finding her naked and deceased in the tub full of water, all of that immediately calls your attention to a violent struggle of some sort. The sheer brutality and sadistic nature of what went on in that house. It's something that sticks with you for the rest of your life. There's no way to really prepare for it, but at the same time, you do have a job to do that is important, and that ultimately comes first.
The sheer violence of the scene gives detectives an insight into her killer.
Nikki had 80-something stab wounds on her. That's a lot of rage. Statistically, that amount of stab wounds, that amount of rage, is usually going to be somebody very close to the victim.
They must now determine what took place during Nikki's final 24 hours.
Piecing or reconstructing the last hours of somebody's life prior to us discovering their body is vital. It allows us to basically construct a timeline of the last people who were to see her alive, and then go from there as far as eliminating individuals or focusing on individuals that may or may not have been involved. With the twins being the ones who discovered their mother, We wanted to interview them, find out what they saw, and begin that aspect of the investigation. We bring them into the room, and they're both, Jasmine and Tasmaya, are extremely sorrowful. They are crying. They are inconsolable, as you would expect for young teenage girls to discover their mother deceased. I didn't want to leave them alone. Nobody would have wanted to leave them alone.
Police begin softly, aiming to discover more about their mother.
We learned that Nikki was a hairdresser, and that she was also attending Bowder College, which is a fashion college. So she had aspirations of doing more than just hair. She loved the twins, and Nikki had them involved in cheerleading and dance. Their grades were all A's, exceptional students.
The interview then shifts focus to the last time the twins saw her.
They told me that the night before the murder, Nikki had come in from, their words, partying.
And then when they woke up the next morning, they got ready for school. And when they knocked on their mother's bedroom door, she did not answer. And so they left for school as they normally did. They said that they had not seen their mother at all that morning.
We know she is dead at about 4 when the twins get home from school.
That leaves an 8 to 9 hour window for the attack. As the questioning continues, the crime scene is also being processed.
It was almost impossible to make your way through the living room without stepping on something. Everywhere you looked, everywhere you turned, there was evidence of a struggle. Everything has to be photographed. Everything has to be cataloged and accounted for, so you're very conscious about where you step and how you proceed through the crime scene.
It's incredibly important to collect as much evidence as possible. Even something that may seem inconsequential, you don't know what it means until the investigation is advanced and you have more information.
You could see she's got her back to the wall and goes from one end of the wall all the way down to the other, and you can tell it's a battle. You can see that she made it to the back door. You can see her blood grip on the door handle. She tried to get out. The door was locked. And then you can finally see at the frame to her bedroom door where she's holding on to the wall, and then you can see the blood streaks as she grips the wall and slides down. And that is the largest concentration of blood. And that's the fatal area, we think. Looking at the carpet, you can see where she was drugged, blood streak going into the bedroom.
As far as the house itself, there were not your normal indicators that you would find in instances of a forced entry, broken locks, or a kicked-in door, or broken windows.
So we knew that whoever had been in there had been allowed into the house.
The twins then say that when they arrived back at the house, it was locked.
I came through the door, I put my key in, I just turned it, and I opened the door.
When a woman is killed, oftentimes the first person police look at is her boyfriend or her partner or her husband. And the reason for that is because it's the person they're closest to, and that's the person with the most motive.
Well, we learned that the girl's biological father pretty much disappeared not long after their birth. They knew of him, but he had moved to Canada.
He was eliminated from any sort of person of interest, right away.
But the girls say there is a man in Nikki's life.
The two girls told us about Robert Head and the relationship that he had with their mom. That he was a truck driver that was gone for long periods of time, but that he owned the house and that they were allowed to stay there. The age difference between them was significant. I believe it was around 20 years. It's kind of a sugar daddy relationship that the girls were aware of. A unique relationship, to say the least.
The twins then provide another key detail, which gives Robert a potential motive.
Does your mom have any other friends or anybody else that come over that you know of?
Talked to a lot of men. Talked to some men, but the only one I've been hearing her talk to lately is Joe.
When police are investigating a case of someone who was sexually involved with another individual, and they realize that there is some sort of love triangle going on, they will pursue that angle and they will investigate it, and they will see if possibly they'd rather have that person dead than have them with somebody else.
Robert Head was immediately a person of interest, obviously, because of his relationship with Nikki. Given the fact that there was another boyfriend in the picture, it became extremely important that we find him and speak to him.
The discovery of a possible affair between Nikki Whitehead and another man has made her boyfriend, Robert, the first suspect in her murder.
The twins said that Robert had overheard Nikki speaking to a man on the phone the night before the murder. We had to eliminate the jealousy angle.
To do so, they must first find him.
We were able to contact his employer.
He was driving his truck in another state.
They confront him with the twins' allegations.
Robert told us the night before the murder, they had argued because their agreement was she wasn't going to talk to other men in front of him. He told us that he loved her to no end, that she was his princess, but he understood the age difference and that he knew when he went out of town that if she had boyfriends, he just accepted that. But when he came home, it was him.
People have open relationships, but in every open relationship, there comes a breaking point where the person or one of the persons involved has definitely had enough.
Robert downplays the argument, but the truth lies with the timeline.
They have GPS on the truck that he drives, and so we were able to see when he left town. He was out west and would not have been possible for him to commit the crime.
Satisfied, police move on to the other man in the love triangle.
She's got a live-in boyfriend and she's got a second boyfriend, and that's definitely a relationship we was going to investigate.
Once again, Nikki's daughters provide a critical clue.
They brought up that their mother had been arguing with her boyfriend, Joe, on the phone the night before the actual incident.
This was about 3 a.m. She kept yelling at Joe, "No, don't come to my house."
This is the second fight for Nikki in her last 24 hours.
Okay. What do you know about Joe?
Like, they argue a lot because she was like, have a nice life, man. Yeah, because they were arguing last night.
Was it a argument that went bad? It is a viable motive for murder, and it has to be investigated.
Then, A witness from that day heightens suspicions even further.
Canvases of a neighborhood are always good in crime scenes like this and incidents like this. The neighbors revealed that there was a black car parked out front, either on the curb or in the driveway.
The car was spotted at 1:30 p.m.
We wanted to identify and find out who it belonged to.
Pretty quickly, we looked up Joe Carter, and he had a black vehicle registered to him.
Police tracked Joe down at his workplace.
Joe is a barber, and his barbershop happens to be right beside the salon that Nikki did hair at.
When we went in to speak to him, everybody inside the barbershop initially was very reluctant and dismissive of us. We said, this has to do with Nikki Whitehead. It's very important. And I guess by the tone of our voice, he understood that this wasn't just some idle questions that we had. When we told Joe what had happened, Joe's reaction was shock. And, you know, he was trying to light a cigarette and his hands were shaking. Seeing anybody's reaction to news like that is always important.
As an investigator, you're looking for the responses. Are they genuine? Are they fake? What we do is we look at it and say, that's interesting. What did they have to hide?
Joe Carter's admission to arguing with Nikki Whitehead the night before she is killed prompts police to bring him downtown.
We told him we're here to see if you're a suspect or to eliminate you as a suspect.
Joe described their relationship as somewhat rocky. It's investigation 101. You begin to probe about what the argument was, what the disagreement is, why, what was causing the tension. They had been arguing about her use of alcohol and the status of their relationship.
Joe also claims that on the day Nikki was killed, he spent the entire time working at the barbershop, over 16 miles away.
We asked him to go take a polygraph exam.
A polygraph examination, in essence, is to provide you with information only and not necessarily evidence, to perhaps corroborate a feeling or information you have. If you believe the witness is not telling you the total truth, a polygraph may help you to prove they're being deceitful about something.
But he passed, and he was not showing any deceit. We also interviewed his co-workers, who all confirmed his alibis.
His concern appeared to be genuine and for Nikki.
The one question left unanswered is the black car.
The post office had actually logged that car because if it sits in front of a mailbox too many days, then they'll write a little complaint note and put it on the car. And so we were able to determine that that car was actually visiting someone just slightly up the street a little bit and was there innocently. When you work criminal investigations, you're going to follow some leads that look hot and they're going to be dead ends.
But the neighborhood canvas turns up another lead.
Well, we were interviewing everybody that would come in, you know, what have you seen at this house? We learned that someone had seen a red car parked in Nikki's driveway during that day.
The red car is spotted at 3 p.m., right within the time frame police believe Nikki's unknown attacker gained access to the house.
The red car was important. We wanted to identify and find out who it belonged to.
We found that Nikki had a friend that drove a red car, and so obviously we go in and talk to that friend and said, hey, did you happen to go by Nikki's house today? And she was very forthcoming. Yes, I did. I had an appointment for Nikki to fix my hair today.
Nikki did makeup and other cosmetic work for people. They would set up appointments and come to her house. The woman, she had gone to the house, she had knocked on the door. She knocked repeatedly, thinking that maybe she was napping or that there was some other reason why she was not home. After nobody coming to the door, nobody answering, she left.
They trace the woman's cell phone records, which confirm she was only at the house for a few short minutes.
We know from looking at our scene, this was probably a 20-minute battle that she fought for her life. So we were able to eliminate her being involved with the incident. She's probably grateful she didn't go in at that time.
It's their last solid lead in the hunt for Nikki's killer.
Nikki had a business card that had her actual picture of her eyes on the business card. I kept that card at my desk because I didn't want to forget that I needed to be Nikki's advocate. It was special. I saw a woman that grew up rough, but she saw a better life. And not only saw a better life and was doing better for herself, but she wanted better for her children. I'm like, man, I wonder what's going to happen to these girls. I hope some family member is able to take care of them.
The woman the twins call Grandma is actually their 75-year-old great-grandmother, Della Fraser. Police learn that until very recently, Della was the twins' legal guardian.
We learned that Nikki grew up on the streets, so to speak. She was raised by Della, her grandmother. She was pregnant with the twins at age 17.
Nikki was still present in their lives, but the main role of raising the girls belonged to Della.
When Nikki met Robert, she became somewhat stable. Nikki wanted to provide a stable environment for him and thought she could with Robert's help.
And Nikki felt because of Della's age, she wasn't able to provide the sort of stern rules and guidance that the girls needed at the time. The Rockdale County Juvenile Court had decided that it was important for the girls to establish a relationship with their mother. And in order to do so, they needed to move in with their mom. The two girls had just been brought back into their mom's life just a couple weeks prior to the murder.
The records indicate a fractured family history.
The relationship with Della Fraser, being the twins' great-grandmother, was very much at odds with Nikki.
She loved the twins, and she thought it best that she raise them. The relationship had become strained.
This elevates Della from doting grandmother to person of interest.
Family murders are more common than people think. Sometimes it's planned, sometimes it's done in a fit of rage. Despite how appalling it is to many of us, family murders tragically aren't all that rare.
When you are investigating something of this nature, you cannot eliminate anyone without having run them through, every possible scenario and vetted where they've been and what they've been doing and the nature of their relationship with the victim.
Police also learn there are other things at stake.
The situation with the 2 minors living with Della, she was able to get some state assistance. So losing them back to Nikki when she lost them had been a little financial cost, and so might have been motivation.
A motive for family or domestic murder could be money, could be the loss of money. It's a very strong motivator.
A custody battle has made Della Fraser the latest person of interest in the murder of her granddaughter, Nikki Whitehead.
One of the key traits of, I find, the more seasoned homicide detectives is separating emotion from fact. To do that, you have to look at the basics. You have to look at their motive, their means, their opportunity, and, in certain cases, it may not always be that apparent.
Della is requested to come to the station for questioning, but shows up 6 hours later.
When we initially interviewed her, I would talk to her. I would say, what do you think? Do you think that Robert or Joe could have done this? Or do you think somebody else or somebody you can think of?
When questioning family members, it is very difficult. You have to protect your case, and you have to realize you're dealing with the victims, potentially. And your victims, being the survivors, one of them could be the killer.
Detectives need to determine not only where she was at the time of the murder, but whether Della had the means to do it.
This is a rage killing, and that's shown in the viciousness of the attack and the number of times the mother was stabbed.
To look at Nikki's body and the amount of rage and sadistic premeditation to go through all of this.
This was a battle.
The physical limitations make it seem unlikely, so they turn to her alibi.
When we looked at Della, we were able to put her somewhere else at the time we thought the incident happened.
We eliminated Della as a potential suspect.
But the work involved in examining the family dynamic uncovers a new lead.
We found that there was previous incidents that had taken place at her house.
I got dispatched to a call at the house. As I pulled up in front of the house, I see Nikki running out of the garage screaming. Nikki had marks on her neck, scratches on her arms, indicative of someone that had been in some sort of a tussle.
Officer Myra Scruggs attempts to calm Nikki down.
Anytime you're involved in any kind of a domestic situation or disturbance or any kind of physical altercation, you're gonna have people that are at an elevated state of emotion. They're usually very upset, they're crying, they're yelling, they're trying to tell you what happened, which is what the case was with Nikki.
Through tears, she reveals her assailants.
She said the girls jumped on her. When I spoke to the girls, they showed zero emotion. Their faces were stoic. They were angry. The girls had no marks on them whatsoever. It was so alarming to see these stoic faces. And I've been doing this long enough to know that no one is going to have that much calm about them. Certainly not 14-year-old girls who had been in an altercation with their mother. After they went to court on the assault on their mother from my case, the girls were placed back in the care of their great-grandmother. Everything told me that something wasn't right here and that it wasn't over.
The attack on their mother, 2 years prior to her death, introduces a new pair of suspects.
In the very beginning, we had a very established timeline set by the twins themselves. They left the house at a normal time, they got to school, and then they came home. And they discovered their mom's body.
The twins' hidden history of violence drives investigators to scrutinize their account of that day in greater detail.
You look for irregularities. What's different today than happens every day? Initially, the twins told us they missed the bus, but they tell us they were able to walk to school and only missed 15 minutes of class. So I put my special operations team on foot. It's about 2.5 miles from their house to the high school, and I had them walk the route looking for any surveillance cameras between the house and the high school. I have our school resource officer pull the video at the high school.
The school surveillance camera shows they arrived at 10:15 a.m.
It's 2.5 hours later than what they're telling us. So that's our first irregularity.
That's a lie. How many times have you lied to me?
0.
The only individuals who we kept finding holes in stories and lies were the twins.
With their story now in question, police revisit the twins' original account of their mother's final 24 hours.
And the first suspicion at Joe was planted by the twins. They had alleged that Nikki had been in an argument with Joe the night before the murder. We were able to send subpoenas to the phone company and get phone records, and the phone call that she had been on was not to Joe. It was to a family friend that the family considers a relative. Once we interviewed this person, not only had he spoke to Nikki, but he spoke to both of the twins and thought all was well. Never would have guessed that a few hours later that Nikki would have been dead.
They now see, from the beginning of the investigation, the twins were in control.
They were so dedicated to getting out of that house and going back to their own lifestyle that they would have done anything. They would have told any lie to make themselves the victims.
But was this motive enough for murder?
They were given free rein to come and go as they pleased from Della's house. With their mother, she had rules, she had curfews, she had limits as to what was allowed and what was not.
Nikki was strict on them.
Nikki could foresee that these are beautiful young girls. They were getting into boys. They were getting into a little too much partying. She saw the forest for the trees. She knew what was coming, as with any child that age. I think they're very manipulative, and they know exactly what they're doing. And it had worked for them as younger girls. You know, as you get older, you're playing adult games now. Everything changed.
With focus squarely on the twins, they then discover a key item hidden deep within the evidence collected from the scene.
We located a journal, and the journal had specific writings about how both Jasmine and Tasmaya felt about their mom, how unhappy they were, how angry they were with her. I mean, it was a detailed plan about what was going to happen as far as a timeline for the future.
They wrote something to the effect of, if we're ever going to get back to Della's, it's going to have to be soon. And the other one responds, yeah, she's got to go.
Police now have written evidence implicating Nikki Whitehead's twin daughters in her murder.
These girls realized that they weren't going back, that this was it. They were going to have to live with their mother. So they made their decision. And the decision was to kill their mother.
Right now, it's just a theory. They still have to prove it.
The autopsy was able to reveal that there was actually a hair lodged in between the teeth of Nikki. That hair was matched to one of her daughters as having come from her.
The interesting thing in this case was that hair was found in Nikki's teeth. That is not someplace where you would anticipate finding DNA of a relative, of somebody that you're cohabitating with. So that's the importance of not only finding DNA, but interpreting its significance.
This connects back to something police noticed when the twins were first questioned.
We see one of them biting herself. And of course we're like, hey, what are you doing? And she said, I bite myself when I'm stressed out like this. Matter of fact, we look at those bite marks and there's a little space in the two front teeth, and we know that Nikki's got a little gap in her two front teeth. So we have an odontologist make a mold of Nikki's teeth and compare it. And that odontologist said that to a probability, Nikki bit the twin defensively as the twin had her from behind trying to break the hold.
Ultimately, the bite mark is what sealed her fate. I do believe that she left that bite mark for us.
On May 21st, 2010, the twins are arrested just before their high school graduation. Confronted with the evidence, they eventually make a stunning on-tape confession, revealing the true series of events.
The day began as the girls waking up and getting ready for school, and then getting into an argument with their mom about something minor. Something related to boys or a curfew, something of that nature. Maybe it was the resentment of going from a house with their grandmother with no rules or restrictions to living with their mother, who suddenly was enforcing these rules. Regardless, it created a hostile sort of environment and relationship between the two of them. Ultimately, it erupted into a physical fight.
She just screamed out and stopped. I had her hands, she has her feet. Kind of like a joint effort.
These two girls are now at 16. They're about her same build and stature. Nikki's a small frame woman. She's fighting for her life. The girl's choking her from behind, and Nikki just using everything that she can because she's outnumbered and out-weaponed and everything. She's doing everything she can, and she bit the twin trying to escape.
They began repeatedly stabbing their mother.
I think I picked up a knife and I stabbed her. It was multiple times.
In the head, in the neck, in the breasts, in the back.
She's just bleeding, her head bleeding, I guess from the face. And she's just bleeding everywhere. Blood on the floor.
And then, like nothing happened, the twins go to school.
And as they walk down the hall, one of them veers off from the other one to a trash can. We don't know if that was a knife. By the time we saw that video, sanitation had already picked up the school's trash, so we'll never know.
At one point, they tried to claim self-defense, but it was so ridiculous. There was no way anybody was ever going to wrap their head around a story about self-defense, given what the inside of the house looked like.
And I think it was at that moment that I realized that these girls are sociopaths. You know, how do you kill your mother and then go to school? and continue your day like it never happened, and then come in the door and act like you found her that way. It's hard to imagine that your own children could inflict that upon you. It's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking.
In exchange for a guilty plea, the pair are offered a deal, 30 years each for voluntary manslaughter.
So those girls won't be out until they're in their late 40s, which I think that served justice. Because you had two young ladies that I think are, they're just evil.
I think most people are uncomfortable or unwilling to accept that as something that could exist in 16-year-old girls. But knowing that they did plead guilty and that they're behind bars and justice was found ultimately for Nikki, you're able to move past it.
They're ultimately where they need to be. It breaks our heart, having listened to Nikki talk about these girls and the potential for these girls, how intelligent they were, beautiful young girls. I hate it that their mother couldn't make it work, that Nikki tried her best. And I don't think she should have had to pay for that love with her life.
Secret lives can be the death of you.
A brutal killing.
She was just this lovable girl who had no enemies.
There was no reason for this.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
The dangers of internet dating, it's a game of Russian roulette.
Only her closest friends knew that she had this wild side.
There's plenty of crazy people out there that, she might have sent a picture to.
The truth will be revealed.
She fought for her life.
That's a pretty violent way to kill somebody.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Staten Island's Willowbrook neighborhood. A world away from the hustle and bustle of New York.
It's basically like Smallville, USA. The neighborhood itself is made up of a lot of Orthodox Jewish families.
On a sunny Saturday, you'll see people walk into the synagogue. Safe, quiet area.
But when a mother comes home one night after work, she finds it far too quiet.
Seema Palsy came home around 7 p.m. that night. Something didn't appear to be right from the beginning.
The back door appeared to be open. She thought her daughter, Eliza, would still be at work.
The house appeared to be in disarray. There was papers thrown on the floor, drawers open, objects thrown all over the ground. The first thing she did is to call her daughter to see if Eliza was okay. There was no answer. She was, upset and worried. She goes to check her daughter's bedroom door. It's locked.
She panicked. She She ran outside, she called 911 and waited for police to come.
She felt that something bad happened, and then she didn't want to see that by herself.
NYPD Detective Michael Kenny is called to the scene.
When the police come in, they break down the door. Eliza Posse was found dead in her bedroom. She was 18 years old.
Once the police told Seema what had happened to Eliza, she just started shrieking, screaming, like people who didn't even know what was going on were coming out of the houses to see what was going on outside. She could not believe the daughter that she just left several hours earlier was now dead.
To capture the killer, Detective Kenny will need to piece together Eliza's final day on Earth.
The last 24 hours are critical to any investigation. It provides the information the investigator needs, such as who, what, where, when, and why. And that applies to every murder case as you're trying to solve it.
The first thing we do in trying to determine the time of death was speak to the last people that spoke to her. So our first interview obviously would be Seema, her mother. When Seema left around 10 a.m. in the morning to go to work, Eliza was still home. Eliza normally would have been going to work around 1 p.m. That particular day, she called in late. So she was going to work after 1 o'clock. Seema comes home around 7. So somewhere between 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. is when Eliza was killed.
Through tears, her mother provides the details of Eliza's life, now cut tragically short.
Eliza and her mother were very close. This was her little girl who she was looking forward to, watching grow up and get married and have kids. She just graduated high school. She was taking off a year just to work and save up some money. She was just a very friendly, outgoing girl, liked by anybody who knew her. Eliza grew up in a very religious, Orthodox household. Her mother and father divorced about a year before the murder, and her father moved back to Israel.
Eliza's mother isn't the only family member interviewed at the scene.
Eliza had a half-brother, Raviv Gabe, and he was just getting married as the parents got divorced.
Raviv ran a kosher cookie business. I wanted to know what he did that day, where he was. Raviv told me that he was delivering cookies. He was out on Long Island around 1 p.m. Making a delivery. After he learned of his sister's death, he came to the house to console his mother. Raviv was with Seema, hugging her, consoling her, and asking me a lot of questions. How could somebody do this? We need to solve this case.
For Detective Kenny and his team, the first step is to examine the crime scene.
There's Eliza laying on the ground, naked. There was a pillow over her face, the towel underneath her, and a mattress that was pulled over part of her body.
Her hair was wet still, so they were theorizing that she would have just come out of the shower.
But it almost appeared that she was placed there. It looked like there was some bruising on the face. There wasn't a lot of trauma to the neck.
Suffocation is one of those types of murder that requires the victim to be overpowered by the assailant. It is not a death that is easily accomplished if the victim is able to fight and struggle, and therefore it can take a prolonged period of time, and there's an element of pain and suffering.
But this person overpowered Eliza pretty quickly, but you would think it would be a male, somebody bigger and stronger than she was.
She was in a state of undress, which automatically you have to entertain the possibility that there was sexual assault or sexual activity.
We fingerprinted all the areas that we could. We bagged the pillow that was over her face, the towel that was underneath Eliza. There was a spot or two of blood on the towel.
And they discovered some skin under her fingernails. Of course, they scraped that and sent that to the lab also to check for DNA.
When investigating a crime such as this, you want to throw a wide net and try to collect as much evidence and data as possible.
We knew that ultimately some DNA would be coming back from Eliza, whether the blood stain or the stuff under her fingernails. I felt early on that anybody I spoke to, I would take a DNA swab.
But processing this evidence takes time.
The CSI effect, as it's known, has altered the public's perception of how long things take. Crimes are not solved in 2 hours. It takes hours and hours of examining evidence and analyzing test results that come back.
Obviously, you're not going to stop an investigation and just wait till it comes back. This was a high-profile case, and the pressure to solve this case was strong.
Detectives worked to uncover what brought the killer into the Parseys' home.
There was a few possibilities in how Eliza was killed. The first, obviously, being a burglary. Given that the house was in disarray, that was obviously our first angle.
After the police did a search, they determined that maybe a few dollars and some jewelry was missing.
If you're breaking into a house to steal spare change and the homeowner comes in, what the burglar is thinking is, I can try to run away, but I may not make it. And if I don't make it, then I'm going to jail for a long time. And so they make a split-second decision and they commit a murder.
In this particular case, it appeared that somebody entered through the rear door. The first thing you want to check is people's MOs. Is there a pattern? Is there a particular person that's going around, going through unlocked back doors?
Detectives canvass the neighborhood, looking for a lead. They discover a community in shock.
It's not a place where you get murders. But here you have a girl who everybody might have saw the day before, or waving, saying hi. And now they find out that she's dead and possibly raped in her own bedroom. I mean, they just couldn't fathom it. This is something you see on the 6 o'clock news in another neighborhood, not in their backyard. It's also a neighborhood where neighbors look out for each other. If there's a stranger, people take notice.
Looking at the window from 1 p.m. to 7, the neighbors did identify this particular group of landscapers that were in that vicinity at the window where Eliza could have been killed. That would be the opportunity if there's a bunch of people cutting lawns. Nobody would take a second look if somebody was to walk down into the driveway, go in the back of the house, and try doors. There was 5 young men. We end up interviewing each one of them. All 5 of the landscapers, we took DNA swabs, and we took fingerprints. It was also helpful to get a reaction on somebody not wanting to be swabbed or being swabbed. Each one of them were very cooperative. My gut was that they weren't involved, that they were just landscapers doing their job.
They looked to Eliza herself for more clues.
And looking at the body, it didn't appear like there was a substantial struggle. If somebody broke into your house and it was a stranger, there would be some screaming and yelling, maybe chasing, running around. If Eliza was familiar with the assailant, it might have been like, what are you doing here? And then an attack happened.
A key detail from the crime scene adds weight to this theory.
In cases in which the body is covered and the body is concealed, that suggests that the murderer has feelings of shame about what they've done.
They can't handle looking at the dead person, which leads the investigator to believe this killer knew the dead person.
Detectives turn to her brother Raviv to learn more about her relationships.
Raviv gave us some direction on whom we want to speak to regarding her personal life. Most of his conversation was directed at the ex-boyfriend. He insisted that we look at him, that he was a controlling, aggressive ex-boyfriend that had feelings for her that were still unresolved. Raviv felt strongly that this was the person who killed Eliza.
The troubled history between Eliza Parsi and her former boyfriend Marique has caught the attention of the NYPD.
She had broken up with him a little while before, and he did not take it well. On surface, it's just a couple of teenagers breaking up. This was a little more intense. She was this Jewish Orthodox girl, and he was a Muslim, came from a Muslim family, so some people wondered if that's the reason why she broke up with him.
The families didn't really want them together in the first place.
He started to stalk her, follow her to work, follow her after work, seeing where she was, who she hung out with. He just wouldn't take a no from her. There was one time when he even broke in. She was sleeping, and she woke up to see him standing over her bed.
He was definitely somebody that we were looking at, a person of interest that we felt strongly that he might have been involved. We start going into some of his background. We came to understand that he had some sort of business connections with fake handbags. He was somewhat of a quasi-criminal. He wasn't an altar boy, so to speak.
Then, Marique shows up at the crime scene.
It's rare to have persons who I will call witnesses for now, waiting at the crime scene to volunteer information to the police. It's unusual.
I felt it was important to grab him, bring him back to the precinct, and basically get a timeline from him in the last 24 hours where he's been. His whereabouts for those 24 hours was, I was home, sleeping, and did this and that. He didn't have a concrete alibi, especially the window that we were looking at from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Detectives take Marique's DNA and look into his movements on the day of the murder.
Eliza lived in Staten Island, and Staten Island is separated from the rest of New York City by the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. A lot of New Yorkers have what they call an easy pass. They will have a time and date when somebody went over the bridge and paid the toll. So this is a very effective tool for police.
We ordered the Easy Pass records, we ordered his telephone records. We were waiting for them to come back, along with the DNA.
Marique's behavior takes a strange turn.
Marique showed up at the funeral.
It was quite the ruckus. In fact, I think Raviv had to be restrained from going after him. The mother was yelling and screaming. They had to forcibly remove the ex-boyfriend from the services. For the ex-boyfriend to go to the funeral, from my perspective, there'd be a couple of reasons. Number one, he wanted to go to appear that he was grieving Eliza just like everybody else. He also might have wanted to go to see other people's reaction, what information he might be able to gather from the conversations at the service. Staying close to the investigation could be a reason to be there. He was a constant person of interest.
As the spotlight glares over Marique, Eliza's pathology exam reveals a key new detail.
It was determined that she was not raped, but it was determined that she recently had consensual sex with someone.
One of the angles that they're normally going to look at is talking to Eliza's friends to get an idea of the person that died. And in the conversation, they let us know there was this kind of secret life that Eliza was living.
Only her closest friends knew that she had this wild side to her, where she would go into clubs in the city, and sometimes she would meet somebody that night. And to the people on the block or her neighborhood, that was probably just as shocking, if not more, than the murder itself.
She had a very solid community of people that were the same as her. And, you know, at 18 to say, you know what, let me go into the city, find somebody different, find somebody more fun. There's a certain maturity to think of that and want to explore outside your own little community.
But Eliza was doing more than frequenting clubs.
We found that Eliza was meeting people on the internet and having sexual encounters with the people that she met. Back then, there was no Instagram, there wasn't Facebook. The internet was still in a kind of an infancy stage. It was a bit of a oddity. Was it ill-advised to meet people on the internet? Yes.
The dangers of internet dating is it's a game of Russian roulette. You do not know what is going to happen to you if you get into a closed room with a person you've never met before.
There's plenty of crazy people out there that she might have sent a picture to, and that was enough to try and track her down. She might have said where she lives, and that was the extent of their exchange. And he might have come and killed her.
Detectives begin the daunting task of tracing Eliza's online activity.
When we actually see a murder that the theory is it was internet dating based, they're very difficult to solve because of the ability to hide behind a website, to hide behind an email address, to hide the address out of the country. It's very difficult to deal with and solve because you're dealing with fake identities all the time.
They manage to uncover a direct link to Eliza's timeline.
Police found out that Eliza was supposed to meet up with somebody that she had met online, and she had talked to him the night before her death, and that she had made plans to meet up with him in the near future.
The old adage is if you have a dead woman, you put her last 4 boyfriends in a room and one of them did it.
Is this internet encounter with this young man, maybe he wanted something more and she didn't want to give him it.
Detectives hunting Eliza Parsi's killer have a new person of interest, a man she met online.
Nobody was calling us and say, by the way, I also met Eliza on the internet, and you know, we were intimate. So we had to do our due diligence and find this young man.
Eliza's communication with him reveals another key detail.
The day before she was killed, he did meet with her after 10 o'clock when Seema left. They were sexually active.
What she would do is, her mother had a pretty set schedule, so she knew when she would leave and come back. She would have people come over to her house, and instead of coming in through the front, she would leave the back door open, and this way no one would see them.
I don't know if that was a daily thing, if he would have came back the next day at 10 o'clock. He would have been somebody that was familiar with the area, familiar with the place, familiar with when mom's not home. So he would definitely fit in the timeline of when she was killed.
In order to speak with him, they must first track him down.
We had some forensic detectives taking IP addresses and matching them with people.
They trace the young man to a home in Brooklyn. Police bring him in for questioning.
If you've communicated with a person on a computer, there's no way of hiding that. And there will never be a way for you to deny that. Full stop.
He was cooperative. He was forthright that he did know her, that he did meet her, that he'd been to the house, how it was coordinated. You know, he waited for her sometimes. If he was there too early, he would have to walk around the block. He knew the mother's car. He would have to wait to see to make sure that they didn't cross paths. He was very forthright regarding the relationship, that it was a secret relationship, that they met on the internet, that there was only a couple of encounters. When I told him that she was murdered, he was obviously upset. He was surprised. But he did say that he did not meet her on the day she was killed. All this stuff was information that he gave me freely, and he also freely gave me his DNA. We ordered the Easy Pass records. We ordered his telephone records. I didn't feel that he was a person of interest.
Investigators continue to scour Eliza's digital history.
For each person that we identified and she met on the internet, I would go through a timeline. And I would have them do the 24 hours, what they did, where they were, who they were with during that time, how they knew Eliza. And obviously I would take a DNA swab of each one of them. In interviewing each of the person that we identified, I didn't have a specific feeling that any one of them was a person of interest. They seemed to be people that were involved.
They were looking at these people, but no one was ruled out. Eliza's murder was not your typical homicide, but the detectives that work it, they were very dogged. That's the thing with homicide detectives. You know, they take it personal. It's almost like one of theirs, one of their family, and they work, you know, it seems like they work that much harder. When this one, they left no stone unturned, all while waiting for the DNA to come back.
As police quietly investigate Eliza's secret life, the press is making it public.
It went from a burglary to now here's a young, pretty girl who might have been caught up in some kind of sexual encounter, and you know that gets the press a little more interested.
It was an unfair dramatization of what what's going on. I personally felt bad about that. I did get phone calls from Seema, asking me, and she found that out from the news. It wasn't fun to tell the mother that she learned from the news that her daughter, who was 18, was sexually active with strangers. It wasn't a comfortable conversation. When Eliza was 18, my daughters were like 15, 16. Every once in a while, those things can creep in. You can say, oh, my daughter, is home alone at times. But you have to be able to separate your professional from your personal life. You see the things that people have done to another, and you try not to get hardened from it, but you have to look at it as a job. You're there to make a difference. You're there to get from A to Z, and you have to stay focused.
This focus leads to detectives uncovering her name on a police report.
This kind of secret life that Eliza was living, unbeknownst to her mother and her brother, had its consequences. She made a report that she was sexually assaulted.
She left the bar in Harlem and went to an apartment, and when she woke up, there were several naked men standing over her.
Could have one of these 4 or 5 assailants looked for retribution towards her for this assault? I didn't do anything and you're causing trouble for me. I don't want to be arrested and I'm going to now kill you.
A report claiming Eliza was sexually assaulted by multiple men gives Detective Kenny a new line of inquiry.
I think this kind of alternate lifestyle that she was at a young age of 18 had its consequences. And this was obviously something of interest for us as to what might have caused her demise.
But tracking them down will be an uphill battle.
Police investigated it, but they were not able to arrest anyone.
It wasn't like all of a sudden, this is it. We found out that she made a complaint that she was raped, and these are the people. There were so many different layers, so many aspects. But you always have to follow wherever investigation goes. You're not going to discount anything. Obviously, then I had to follow through with that and find out who she met and how she had contact with these people.
You as a police officer have to be aware of that at the time, that if there are other suspects, you must investigate them. It's part of your job. You can't be totally tunnel visioned on the one person and only that person. If these branches take you away, you have to investigate it.
As detectives search for the identities of the men who assaulted Eliza, the DNA results come back and open up an entirely new direction.
The first phone call I get from the medical examiner's office is that the DNA results ruled out any of the males that she met on the internet, the landscapers. It ruled out the boyfriend, the ex-boyfriend. To my surprise, the DNA that is found on the towel was that of a relative, of a male.
The only male relative they had was the half-brother, Raviv Gabe.
To me, it wasn't like, oh, we got the person. It was that, could have been the blood was left because he had a bloody nose the day before and they just didn't clean the towel.
DNA can be a very helpful investigative tool in that it may cause investigators to look at someone that they had not considered before, that they may want to investigate what their activity was the last 24 hours and how that related to the victim's activities.
Detectives work to understand how Raviv fits into the timeline of the homicide.
When I originally spoke to him and asked him where he was, what he was doing that day, he said he was out in Long Island making a delivery. We just started to break down where he said he was at what particular time. So we ordered his Easy Pass records. Once we get the records, we'd be able to get a photograph. As you go through the toll, he takes a picture. They're what they call robbery cameras. So anybody that comes onto the island, we can basically have a picture of who was in that car. He had a very unique delivery truck. We had photos of him coming over the Verrazano in around 1 o'clock. Now, Raviv is a person of interest. Why would he say he was somewhere else at the window where she was apparently killed?
This gives them enough for a warrant to examine Raviv's cell phone records.
I carry my cell phone everywhere I go. If you go to my cell phone provider, you will find that the cell phone towers were going off in the area I'm telling you I was in. Depending on what you've got turned on your phone, you can be placed down within 2 or 3 yards of where you actually were at any given time. And unless it's a great coincidence that I just happened to be within 10 square yards of where the murder took place, and I had a motive and opportunity to do it, my cell phone is going to clear me.
When we got his cell site information puts him in Staten Island in and around 1 p.m. We knew exactly where Raviv was at any given time. 1:30, we have him in the area of the house. And then right on the corner around 2:10, so why would he lie?
Raviv's timeline gives him means and opportunity. Next comes the search for motive.
About a year or so before the murder, Raviv got married. And as a wedding gift, the family gave Raviv the business, delivering the cookies to the grocery stores.
The problem with it was that whether it was Raviv not knowing how to run it, being a young kid, just married, but the business wasn't doing well.
We found out that he was trying to keep his wife in the lifestyle that she was accustomed to. Our parents had a very nice house. They had more money than Raviv and his family, and that was a lot of pressure on him.
I've experienced several cases in my time where the suspect is a family member. This often happens when there's inheritance involved. So money is a great motivator. Money makes people kill too.
But Raviv's money trouble doesn't explain why Eliza would be targeted.
But Raviv did stay close with his sister. He still kept an eye on her, asked her what she was doing.
There was nothing that there was hostility or she owed him money or they grew up together hating each other. But you want to kind of let the facts take you to whatever place it takes you.
With Raviv looking guilty, detectives need to compare his DNA specifically to what was found at the scene.
The DNA that is found on the towel was that of a Raviv's. And the skin under her nails was in fact also Raviv's. There's nothing more solid than when somebody was assaulted and there's dead skin under somebody's nails. Why would a brother want to kill his sister for no reason? It doesn't make any sense.
Detective Michael Kenny is convinced Eliza's half-brother is the one who killed her. But concerns over a conviction still remain.
I have to go back at some point and tell the mother that your son killed your daughter, and she's gonna want to know why. The best way to know why is to get it from him. So I called Raviv and told him the ex-boyfriend had some other friends that we were looking into, and I don't know who they are. I asked him to come to the precinct and look at some photographs. So he's a little belligerent. He started giving out to me that why it's taking so long, that this case is going on for a month. We all know it's the ex-boyfriend. Why don't you arrest him already? So I have to play along, and I was apologetic. I'm trying my best, but I need your help. To my surprise, he does come in the next day, but he brings his wife. I have his wife sit in one room, and I bring him into an interview room.
Armed with a meticulously constructed timeline, Detective Kenny goes in to break apart Raviv's story.
I start again asking him about his whereabouts, where he was and when. So he starts answering the questions like normally. But then he starts like, why are you asking me? I thought I'm here to look at pictures. And he started getting a little more hostile.
They hit him with they knew that he was lying. They knew that he wasn't in Brooklyn at the time of the death. They knew that he was in Staten Island. And they kept pressuring him. Why'd you do this? And he wouldn't crack. He wouldn't say that he did it.
It's pretty common for people to deny even with that kind of evidence, just for self-preservation.
If the police have evidence that you've done it, and they've got the skills to interview you, they will make you crack in that interview room. Very few people who have committed a crime can withstand a successful police interview.
I just laid it all out for him, that we have your DNA, we know you did it, just tell us why you did it. He kept denying, I didn't do it, but I kind of threatened him. I told him, tell me what happened, or I will go out and tell your wife and the community that you raped your sister and that you and then killed her. Because I don't have any other information, and that's as good a story as any. At this point, he started crying. He told us what occurred. He tells me that the business wasn't doing very well, So in Raviv's mind, something that might have been worth a lot of money a couple of years ago as a wedding gift wasn't worth anything. So he felt that he was still owed a wedding gift. He came to find out that his mother came into some money from the sale of a house. He believed it was more than $25,000. So he felt that she was hoarding that money somewhere. So that's why he broke into the house.
She caught him in the act, wanted to know what's going on.
The confrontation happened in that hallway and then ended up in her room.
The timeline explains moment by moment the tragic events of Eliza's final day and how Raviv's lust for money led him to kill.
Mom leaves the house regularly around 10 a.m. every day, leaving Eliza home alone. Eliza calls her boss and lets her know that she's not going to be at work on time, that she's going to come in later.
Raviv made some deliveries in Brooklyn, and then he altered his route and headed to Staten Island. He went over the Verrazano Bridge, went to the apartment that he went to many times before, entered through the back door, which he knew was open at times.
He already had gone through the downstairs, and he was in the mother's bedroom looking for the money.
Eliza's just coming out of the shower with a towel on her, and he's going through drawers.
She could have grabbed the phone, I'm calling Mom or I'm calling the police, which would have escalated his anger.
She put up a valiant fight. It was all skin under her fingernails, like she fought for her life.
And then he took a pillow, put it over her face, took a mattress, and covered her body, and left.
After he killed her, he got back into his van, which was still filled with cookies, drove back over the Verrazano Bridge, and went into Brooklyn and finished his route. He did show up later in the day, and again appeared to be a very upset brother. But it turned out to be just an act.
Raviv never found anyone in the house because, unbeknownst to him, that money was spent. So there wasn't any money in the house to begin with. I never felt Raviv had any remorse. Sometimes you'll feel like somebody is telling you what happened as I've been holding this in for so long. It just comes out in kind of a release of guilt and stuff, but I never felt that Raviv had an ounce of guilt. If you define a sociopath as just some lacking regret, I think you'd probably say he's a sociopath.
Police charge Raviv Gabe with the murder of his sister.
I have to tell a mother that we solved your daughter's murder, but it was your son who did it. So, it was difficult for me to do that. And, when I went to the house and I told her, she was hysterical. She spoke about her daughter and how beautiful she was and all the things that she had going for her in the future that was ahead of her. And how the son that she brought into this family ultimately killed her.
On May 2nd, 2006, Raviv pleads guilty to a reduced charge of first-degree manslaughter. He is sentenced to 18 years in prison.
1 year for every year that Eliza was alive. So he had to do the same amount of time in prison.
Seema then just started yelling uncontrollably in both English and Hebrew at her son, asking why, or how could he do such a thing? How could he commit such a crime? Here was a young, vibrant girl who had her whole life ahead of her. He ruined so many lives just for a couple of dollars and a piece of jewelry.
I personally felt for the mother. She lost both her kids in the same day. Just wasn't a happy ending.
It goes counter to the whole notion of family. It's a complete destruction of that trust that you have in one another.
She was beaten severely. She was beaten with a claw hammer, she was beaten with a baseball bat.
A brutal killing.
You hear of, crimes of passion. This goes beyond that.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
She knew where she was going to be, at what time, when she'd be back.
When you start owing drug dealers money, people start getting desperate and start getting violent.
Somewhere in that weird web, we got a murderer. And now we just got to figure out who.
The truth will be revealed.
Somehow or another, somebody's got to answer for this.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Grovetown, Georgia, just outside Augusta. It's known as a safe place to raise a family.
Grovetown is starting to grow a little bit, kind of as Augusta's bedroom community. It's kind of a nice little pocket. Your average, middle-class working families.
Everyone seems to know everyone. Everyone's friendly. You wouldn't really lock your doors.
But that sense of security can be dangerously misleading.
Emergency 911.
Yes, I'm over here at Cold Springs. The back door's broke in, and I had come over here to do some work, and I called the owner. I hollered at the door, and I did no response.
All right, I'll get them on over there.
The patrol units that responded, when they arrive at the scene, within short order, they start seeing blood not too far inside, the back door.
My supervisor told me we had an assault and they needed me at the scene right away.
The victim is identified as 41-year-old Kay Parsons.
When I arrived, Kay was already on her way to the hospital. They didn't know if she was going to live or not. They've already got the scene taped off with crime scene tape.
Lead investigator Jimmy Edmonds and his partner Brian Jones begin investigating the grisly crime.
I could see the pool of blood where she was at. She was beaten severely. You can see there was a struggle that took place in the foyer that led into the living room. And then you could tell it went out into the garage. There was a bloody baseball bat next to her. And we also located a bloody claw hammer underneath her car. When you think of a hammer and a baseball bat being used, you start thinking of this is personal. It's
Not like a knife or a gunshot. This is a up close and personal beating.
When you talk about brutality, that's one thing. But this was overkill.
Their first task is to locate her next of kin.
I was able to get a number for David Parsons, her husband. I made contact with him. He was in Los Angeles, California on business. Obviously, he was very concerned about his wife. I had to explain it to him on the phone, which is very tough. He immediately got on an airplane and flew home. You could tell he was distraught. He told the doctor to take her off life support.
Their case is now a homicide. Investigators must reconstruct the last 24 hours of Kay's life to uncover who had reason to commit such a brutal murder.
You have to start trying to figure out where was she, what was she doing, who was she talking to? Did she have any problems with anybody? I mean, did any arguments happen here recently?
She was, always friendly with everybody, but she pretty much lived for her son.
When you have a death, and especially kind of a whodunit right off, right from the get-go, then everybody becomes suspect.
You want to talk to the spouse. It's going to give you some good information to see if there's any problems or anybody has a motive to hurt her. Time's ticking, so, I've got to ask them some hard questions and find out about, their family life. Are they having problems?
With the type of personal crime that this was, it could have easily been something, it could have been family related.
David says he last spoke to Kay at 6:45 p.m., the night before she was attacked, and had been unable to reach his wife by phone all morning.
He gave me no indication of any marital problems. He said, they were in love, they were high school sweethearts.
Everything is just peach pie, just wonderful.
He'd been in California for a couple of days, so I knew it wasn't him that committed the crime. I asked him if Kay had any problems with anybody, if anybody he could think of that would possibly do this, and he said absolutely not.
You still have to figure out, what the motivation is for Kay to be dead.
With so many unanswered questions, their hope rests in Kay's timeline.
You can't look at a body and go, okay, yeah, that 3:05 p.m. is when that, it doesn't work that way. Basically, the frame of reference comes down to who's the last person that talked to him.
Kay Parsons was very predictable. She would get the kids off to school, then come back. She had her daily routine.
We learned Kay left and took her son to school. On the way to school, they stopped and got some fast food for breakfast. She then took him to the school, dropped him off. We were able to verify that through the principal and teachers that were outside. We found the fast food bag and the coffee cup on the floor. We could go back to that place to see, to get a timeline of where she was at.
They learned that Kay purchased the food items at 6:55 a.m. This establishes a 2-hour window until she is discovered.
When you're working backwards from the death, okay, who found them?
A lot of people assumed that it was the contractor who was at the house that may have done this. What was he doing there? He just happened to stumble upon it.
Was that just a happenstance come by that day? Did he have a schedule to come by?
We interviewed Mr. Cozart to find out everything that took place.
What were you doing over there? What did you see when you got there? What were you supposed to be there to do? He said
he was supposed to come there and finish doing some work on the back door.
Cozart tells police he started the repair the previous afternoon and returned at 8:45 a.m. to finish the job.
When he arrived, he knocked on the door, didn't get an answer. He called several times, didn't get an answer. So he went to the backyard to look at the back door where he was doing his work at.
I just opened the gate and I walked in and I seen the glass all over the patio and I said, this don't look good. And I walked up and I hollered, I said, hey, is anybody in there?
He got no response. That's when he dialed 911.
I said, something bad's happened over here.
He also claims before arriving at Kay's house, he was on another job site.
So did he have enough time to do all that stuff and then stage it and then go and change and make sure all this stuff was right and then come back, oh, I happened to find this.
Investigators looked to confirm his whereabouts earlier that morning.
Mr. Cozart was very forthcoming, answered all our questions. He would, gave no indication he was trying to hide anything. We were able to clear him.
He was just there to do his job, and he happened to find this awful crime that had been committed.
But he does provide detectives with an important lead.
He said that when he came back around front, he was calling 911.
Then I seen that boy the next door neighbor sitting down on a rock across the street. And that made me kind of suspicious right there.
Just sitting there. This person asked Mr. Cozart, he said, tell them my house has been broken into as well, which was the house right next door. I found it very interesting. So, of course, wanted to find out where he'd been and why he was there, or why he was across the street.
The young man is identified as Kay's neighbor, 22-year-old Michael Bowers, whose claim appears to be true.
So now that we've got that second house that's been broke into and signs of a burglary and blood on the back door jamb.
And that blood ended up being Kay's blood. So as an investigator, you got to sit back and think, well, if you are a criminal, a burglar, if you just break into somebody's house and beat this woman eventually to death, are you gonna leave and go break into the house next door and hang around to get caught? That doesn't make any sense. I had my suspicions about Michael and why he was there.
Detectives need to speak with Kay Parsons' neighbor, Michael, who they believe may know something about her shocking murder.
You got Michael sitting out there that all of a sudden is just there, kind of out of the blue, with this going on.
As police question Michael, his mother, Becky Sears, and her younger son, Christopher, turn up.
Becky was concerned about her friend Kay.
Looking for insight into how Michael may be involved, they examine the relationship between the two houses.
From the minute that David and Kay moved next door to Becky and her husband, they became immediate friends. They did everything together. Their sons played together. They had couples tennis, couples vacations. They were inseparable. You could see the close relationship that they had with one another, almost like sisters.
Becky tells police about the last time she saw Kay.
Becky and Kay, being friends like they were, they knew each other's routines like clockwork. Becky, she said she left that morning to take her kids to school. She told us that she saw Kay backing out of her driveway. She said she drove to the daycare, dropped her youngest child off, and then drove to the school and dropped her other children off, and then left from there and went to work.
Becky says she returned home as soon as she got the call from her son, Michael.
Michael was there at the time that the contractor found all of this, so he happened to be out front. Now we've got that time frame to work with.
Detectives need to uncover what Michael was up to.
As an investigator, I don't believe in coincidences. Certainly in homicide investigations, there's no such thing as coincidence. There's a reason why things happen.
We took him back to our office and conducted an interview with him to find out, what his story was. Michael had a troubled past. He'd been arrested a few times. He told us that he left the house that morning to go do a painting job with somebody. Come to find out there was no painting job he was going to do. He was lying about the whole thing.
If you lie about your whereabouts, they're going to check that. If you lie about your timeline, they're going to check that. If you lie about who you were with, they're going to verify that. They're going to check everything.
Caught in his lie, Michael offers up a new story.
He said he walked over to a friend's house and pretty much hung out there for a while until his mother left, and then he walked back home. Obviously, he didn't want to get in trouble with his mother because he told her he was going to do a painting job. He called his mother at work and told her that their house had been broken into, but didn't call 911.
Detectives look to place him inside Kay's house that morning.
The back door, the way it was shattered, there was tiny shards of glass everywhere. So I asked Michael to let me see the bottom of his shoes. And I looked at the bottom of his shoes, I see a tiny shard of glass stuck in the bottom of the shoe. So I was like, well, was he in the house? We sent the glass off to the crime lab, and it came back that it was glass from the case back door. His explanation was that once the handyman told him that the house had been broken into, he walked around back and looked inside. And he said that's how he got the glass in his shoe.
Michael's only hope lies in his alibi. He tells police his friend, Anthony, can vouch for him.
Anthony also had some problems with drugs. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, did Michael owe people money for drugs? You start getting in that drug world and you start owing people money, they start doing things to your house, to your family. People start getting desperate and start getting violent.
Police bring Anthony in for questioning.
He said that he'd come over in the morning. Told him I had an appointment at 9 o'clock. I guess that's why he decided to come by so damn early. But that's pretty damn early, dude. He lied to y'all and said that we were gonna go looking for work. Yep.
The friend's like, yeah, he was here all the way up until this point right here, and I had to go to work.
I'm telling you the truth. He was with me, and we were in that house. At 8:27, dude, you gotta go, I gotta go. Ultimately, if him being with me is exonerating him, I'm sorry, but it's the truth, dude. I'm not gonna stick up for Michael, but I'm not gonna lie on him either.
Michael, did he have enough time to get home, do this, stage it, clean up, and then be out front when the contractor happened to pull up?
Michael's departure from Anthony's house at 8:30 a.m. leaves a 15-minute window to walk the mile home and attack Kay before the contractor arrives at 8:45 a.m.
There's just not enough time for him to do all that stuff.
As a result, investigators return their focus to the crime scene.
We've got a house that's been broken into and signs of a burglary.
The master bedroom was ransacked. The only thing that we could determine that was taken was some jewelry. There was a lot of things that normally would be taken in a burglary that were still there.
This indicates that Kay potentially caught the intruder in the act.
At that point, you have the home invasion that turned deadly. Her best friend's house next door robbed, and nobody seems to know what is going on. Everyone just wanted to know who could have done this.
Police utilize a neighborhood canvass, hoping for a break.
We shut down the whole neighborhood. There was one way in and one way out, and we had patrol cars and deputies there stopping every car that came in and came out.
The longer you wait, then, memories go bad. It becomes incumbent upon us as investigators to go out there and knock on doors and ask, hey, when you were out there in the neighborhood the other day, did you see anything around this house, or did you see anything entering or leaving the neighborhood? What do we know about the people in the area around there that could have had contact with Kay?
We check our computers and everything to see, is there anybody around this area that is known for these types of crimes? Burglaries, break-ins, things of that nature.
One name stands out, Aaron Fisher.
We were able to determine that there was a person that lived in that neighborhood that I like to call him a frequent flyer, because we deal with them a lot. He had a troubled past. He had a history of thefts and break-ins.
Most burglars, they break into a residence, they steal whatever they can as quickly as possible, and then they get the hell out again.
But if you're breaking into a house and the homeowner walks into the kitchen, you've got a split-second decision on your hands. Am I going to do a 10-year stint if this person calls 911, or am I going to kill her?
A known criminal in Kay Parsons' neighborhood leads detectives in a new direction.
You gotta take every lead you can and follow up on every lead with a case like this. Because right now you have a whodunit.
Their suspect, Aaron Fisher, lives within sight of the Parsons home.
That person is definitely flagged, and they would examine the past records and see if that person has a propensity for committing escalating degrees of violence.
I knew that he had had some issues with drugs, issues with some theft and some violence. You start by trying to nail down their time frames, nail down their alibis.
When questioned, Fisher tells police he was at home with his girlfriend until 10:30 a.m. that morning.
When we talked to her, we were able to determine that he wasn't involved, that he had an alibi, he wasn't there at the time.
It's another dead end, meaning Kay's murderer is still at large.
And there was a lot of the neighbors over there that were fearful that, there was somebody out there that was doing this, and, we don't know who they are yet. And so now the whole, psycho killer out running around, that fever kind of goes out. They're scared. And particularly with a crime of this magnitude, they're double scared at that point that we don't know who he is, and he can come back and do that to me. The pressure's always there.
The fear is realized through shocking news regarding Kay's neighbor.
We got a phone call, said, "You're not going to believe this." I said, "What?" And they said, "Becky Sears just got shot." I said, "Do what?"
There were so many twists and turns. Every time you seemed like you got a little more information and you had it figured out, boom, here comes another zinger, and it would just throw the entire story off course.
I went to the hospital, spoke with Becky at the hospital. She said she had went to work that night to do payroll because she hadn't been at work. She'd been at the hospital where Kay was.
Someone came out of the bushes, and I heard what I thought was a gunshot, and I fell. They said, he wants his money, or next time it would be my face.
Becky said she didn't know who this person was. She never saw him before in her life, and said she didn't know what he was talking about.
Becky is convinced her shooting is linked to the break-ins and Kay's murder.
Whoever killed Kay, for whatever reason, now had a motive to kill her.
It's not a coincidence. I mean, your house gets broken into, Kay's house gets broken into. She's dead, you get shot.
She was also thinking maybe it was a drug debt that Michael owed, or Michael owed somebody some money.
I think he's trying to stay away from all of that.
But something about Becky's story seems off.
I'm thinking, out of all the places that somebody's gonna come out and shoot somebody, unless you're just that bad a shot, you're not gonna get shot in the lower leg or in the foot. I mean, what purpose does that serve?
You get these feelings and you get these, intuitions, I guess you call them. You just know something's not right. You do this job long enough and you start dealing with people, and some things that just don't add up. You notice all these little details. You gotta have an answer for them.
All it did was just make Becky look suspicious. I mean, because the odds of that happening the way she said it happened, that was astronomical.
With suspicions growing around Becky, Detective Edmonds receives a tip.
I get a phone call from one of the jailers and says there's a gentleman over there that wants to speak with me. So I go over to the jail and I meet with Jerry Jacobs. I don't know who Jerry is, never talked to him in my life.
The first thing you want to look at with somebody, particularly if they're in custody at the time, is what are they charged with? And are they looking to try to make a deal? I'll give you some information if you do this for me, sort of a quid quo pro kind of thing.
He was there on a probation violation of a traffic ticket. So he wasn't in there for anything serious. Jerry proceeds to tell me that he is the brother of Becky Sears, who is the next door neighbor to Kay Parsons. He lived with Becky at her house for a little while, and eventually he moved out with his nephew, Christopher Bowers.
Jerry tells police his sister confided in him.
She come to me one day, or there in the parking lot, crying, and I was like, what's wrong? And that's whenever she told me she was having an affair.
He goes on to tell me Becky and David Parsons, Kay's husband, having an affair. And that Kay found out about the affair. I was like, because David Parsons never told me about this. I had no knowledge of an affair until that point in time right there. It kind of blew my mind. So now I'm going, wait a minute. Now we got some motive building here.
And you're putting these pieces of the puzzle together, and it's kind of starting to make sense now that, okay, this probably was a murder based on this love triangle. But was it Kay's husband that did it? Did Becky have something to do with it? Somewhere in that weird web, we got a murderer. And now we just got to figure out who, and we got to figure out how it happened.
Information provided by Becky's brother, Jerry Jacobs, introduces a shocking new motive in the death of Kay Parsons.
Jerry said she would call him up on the phone. She would break down. She would, be hysterical, crying. He would have to talk her down.
And she had asked me if I knew of anyone, or if I knew a way that we could do this to kill Kay and make it look like an accident.
She wanted Kay out of the way. She wanted her dead so she could have David.
And then, I'd be like, well, Becky, that's okay. Sometimes we all feel that way about people. She's like, no. She's like, I really want her dead. She said, can we do this? And I'm like, no, we can't.
And I wanted to know why Jerry was coming forward. Why was he telling us about his sister? Jerry told me he was watching the news and he saw about what happened at Kay's house. He said, I couldn't live with myself. If I knew this and I knew they did it, he said, I couldn't live with myself.
I don't know if it was David, if he had something to do with it.
He knows some specifics about it or whatever. He's telling us stuff that, at this point we didn't know.
Detectives show Jerry photographs from the scene in the hope he can provide further insight.
It was like, all right, look, the hammer that was used, he had seen the hammer at Becky's house. He recognized the hammer as being one that Becky had.
It shows that it was definitely premeditated. You can grab a baseball bat, you can grab any sort of other implement to kill somebody, but when you bring a hammer with you as well, it shows that there was a certain degree of planning involved in the murder.
Police believe that if Becky is involved, she must have had help.
He told me, he said, I know who did it. I said, oh, please tell.
Because you're real easy to think it could be Michael, you know, the wayward son.
But he told me, he said, I believe it's going to be Christopher and Becky.
I can just hear them right now scheming something together and thinking they can get away with it.
The accusation directs suspicion to Becky's oldest son.
Christopher, he'd tell me, he's like, you know, Mama called me in the middle of the night last night crying, and, you know, if she says if we could get away with it, you know, it would sure make everything better on her because she loves David so much.
And then you start finding out about the relationship with her sons, you know, how one was the black sheep, how one she doted on. Chris was Mama's boy. He was the golden child.
She was buying him motorcycles. She rented him a house. She bought him a truck. She didn't do any of those things for Michael. So it was a totally different relationship between those two. Christopher knew how upset she was about David, how she wanted to be with David, and she knew that Christopher would do anything for her.
Police returned to Kay's husband, David, to confront him with the affair allegations.
First thing I asked him is, tell me about the affair with Becky. Because I just wanted to blow him out of the water. I wanted him to know that I knew a lot, and it's time to come clean. Of course, when I said that, his eyes got big around as saucers.
You're thinking about the husband, and would the husband have a motive to do it?
He just happened to be out of town when this horrendous crime happened.
But then he opened up. He started telling me all about the affair, how long it had lasted.
Kay found out. She knew about it. You know, we talked about it. We were going to work through it. Me and her stay together and move on and move out.
And he came out and said, I cut it off, and I told Kay that it was over with.
What happened when you broke it off with Becky? How did she take it?
Well, she knew the whole time that I didn't want anything to change with my situation with Kay.
I'm not so sure that you're telling us everything at this point.
I'd also told him I was going to pull his phone records and find out who he'd been talking to and what was going on. Well, he came forward then and told me that the night before the murder that he and Becky did talk on the phone.
I called her late Monday night, I believe, and I did talk to her Tuesday. We just talked for a little while about what was going on, and then we got involved in, you know, phone sex over the phone.
And that was Tuesday night?
Yes.
So he's pretty much letting me know that the affair wasn't over with, like he told his wife.
Is it safe to say that your words were saying no as far as the relationship, and your other communications were saying something different?
Now you kind of start seeing the behind the scenes a little bit, and you start to kind of crack into the not so perfect family. So things weren't as peachy as what it seemed.
It puts them further in it, you know? They're putting themselves further and deeper into this investigation just from not telling the truth.
Detectives know he was over 2,000 miles away when his wife was killed.
I knew he couldn't have committed it. It doesn't rule out that he's involved.
The only people who can answer this question are Becky and Christopher.
We had them in different locations, and we just went ahead and talked to them at the same time. So they didn't have a chance to get their stories together. I honestly thought that once we got in there and we talked to Chris, that he would realize that he was just a patsy.
Christopher didn't say a word, didn't ask why, what for, anything. He refused to speak with us.
Your mom's in custody with us right now. She's talking to us right now. And I want you to think long and hard before you choose to go down a road. I want you to be on the right road.
Whatever you're saying, I'm trying to say is a lie. We can end this right now and go get my lawyer. I want to speak to a lawyer right now.
Becky was quite the opposite.
She agreed to talk to us, which surprised me. I didn't think she would. When we started confronting her about the affair with David, about what her brother had told us, she started coming forward.
This is the opportunity for you to be honest and truthful and to tell me what's going on in your own words.
I cared about him very, very much. And there was a time to where, yes, I thought that we would have been able to have a great relationship.
And it's been over for how long?
I can't really even say that it was ever, I mean, it was over, but we still talked. I told my husband and my husband told her.
So she knew.
She finally starts breaking down. She starts crying, and then she starts telling us it was Christopher.
I told him that I loved David, and I should have never told Christopher that, but I did. He knew I was unhappy, but I didn't tell him to kill anybody. I didn't ask him to kill anybody.
Convinced Christopher Bowers killed Kay Parsons, detectives continue to pressure his mother, Becky, on what she knows of the murder.
Her story was that Christopher knew how upset she was about David, how she wanted to be with David. But she kept saying that she didn't know he was going to do it.
I kept telling Christopher that I wanted to be with David, and I put this thought in his mind to do something.
Becky played the consummate victim the whole way.
She then makes a strange admission. On the morning of the murder, she says she picked Christopher up at 4 a.m.
She couldn't answer me why. Why did you go pick him up at 4 o'clock in the morning and bring him over there? You knew what he was going to do. And she said, well, but I didn't think he would do it.
It's a stunning revelation.
She said she received a phone call a little bit later from Christopher saying, come pick me up. She goes down there and picks him up, and he's covered in blood. She said she asked Christopher, what'd you do? He said, I took care of everything. I took care of it. She said, what did you do? And he said, I beat the out of her.
I was so scared.
She also told us about the shooting. She told us that it was Christopher that shot her. The plan was Christopher was supposed to just shoot the gun next to her so her friend could hear it. She said, yeah, he wasn't actually supposed to shoot her, which is a little poetic justice. And she said she wanted to do that so they could try to throw the investigation to try to confuse us.
They now believe that while Christopher committed the act, Becky was the mastermind.
You planted these seeds, you watered these seeds, you picked him up early in the morning so he could come over and reap that crop.
It's remarkable because it shows the degree of control she had over him and just how much, in many ways, he actually loved his mother, that he would go along with this.
We found out real quick with that interview just how conniving and manipulating that Becky actually is. I mean, because she didn't care about anything other than her and her happiness and what she wanted.
Becky's statement also removes any lingering doubts over Kay's husband.
She swore up and down that David did not have any knowledge of this. He didn't know what was going to happen. He was not involved in any way.
On March 27, 2009, Becky Sears and Christopher Bowers are charged with murder.
They're charged the same because they were both equally participating in the crime.
If you're going to arrest somebody for something that didn't do it, they're going to scream and holler, it wasn't me, I didn't do it, I didn't do it. He didn't say a word. He was calm as he could be.
The painstaking analysis of the timeline reveals exactly what happened in the last hours of Kay's life.
Kay left and took her son to school. On the way to school, they stopped and got some fast food for breakfast, and then she drove back home.
Knowing Kay is gone, Christopher stages his ambush.
When she drove back home, she opened the garage. And then as she entered through the garage door into the foyer of the house, Christopher was lying in wait and immediately began to attack her with a hammer. She tried to fight back.
She literally was fighting for her life.
We could tell by the blood evidence. She was able to make it to the garage, and we found a bloody handprint sliding down the garage door opener, trying to open the garage door.
At some point, he switches weapons.
It was just so intense. You hear of, crimes of passion. This goes beyond that.
Christopher then leaves Kay near death and begins to cover his tracks.
Chris then stages that burglary and then stages the one at Becky's house to make it kind of a cover. It was like a burglary gone bad. Maybe they won't suspect me.
And then Becky received a phone call a little bit later from Christopher saying, "Come pick me up." She then took Christopher to her work. Then they got the phone call from Michael about the break-in, and they drove back to the house.
Michael coming home, I think, was just a coincidence. Ultimately, we determined he was not involved.
Christopher is the one that actually killed Kay. There's no doubt in my mind he did. And there's no doubt in my mind he did it because Becky asked him to. She's the one that manipulated her son into being a monster.
I think she played on the daily routines of Kay. She knew where she was gonna be, what time, when she'd be back. And so I think that she used that to her advantage to get Christopher in the house, have a game plan, and to make it easier for him to go next door and attack her.
The district attorney decided to go after the death penalty for the charges. Chris never turned on Becky. Chris never would say a bad word about his mother. They both take a plea deal, and they both get life in prison without the possibility of parole. She is one of the most narcissistic people I've ever met in my life. She thought she could get away with it.
There is a satisfaction there because I've heard all kinds of, dang man, you must be you got a crystal ball or whatever. Now, I just, you get out there and you get on the trail and you just follow it. And until you get some solid answer, concrete, one way or the other, you don't stop.
What length would you go to be with a person that you love? It's just a sad situation for both families. You have these children who are going to be growing up without mothers.